Hello and welcome to this episode of the Wealth Alchemist podcast. My name is Carrie Norley, and today I have the pleasure of having one of my beautiful soul sisters on the show with me. This has actually been like ages in the making to get you on the show, actually. Yes. She is really diving into helping and supporting women and mothers in shameless parenting and in reclaiming pleasure in their lives. If there is one woman in my life that shows me on a regular basis how we can show up and be more and more sensual in our bodies, sexy goddess women, and have everything that we desire in our relationships, it is Jamy. And I know, and I say this because I know the two of us have been on a journey from being in relationships that were miserable, cold, almost ended, like the whole road until now watching both of us, like we've both been on this journey to really show up and be in this really beautiful, embodied, sensual, goddess, feminine woman. And Jamy is one of my favorite people to hang with and dive into these topics. She's brilliant. She does womb work. She's just amazing. I'm super excited to have her here. So welcome to the show, Miss Jamy Schumacher. On socials, you will find her as Jamy Miranda.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here and talk all the things.
All the things.
Yeah.
So today we are going to dive. And when Jamy and I talk, by the way, because we are soul sisters, because we pretty much know most of everything about each other's lives, there's very little that the two of us will probably be unable to share with you on this show. And it will weave and be wonderful. But ultimately, what we are here to talk about today is surrender, and how we actually hold ourselves and trust ourselves enough to be able to surrender into this divine experience of being this fully embodied, gorgeous woman on this planet that allows herself to have abundance of pleasure, joy, and abundance, actually, right? We kind of had a little bit of a play before we got on the call to talk about this, but let's talk first about our body as a channel. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand, but is really freaking important to the whole concept of allowing ourselves to be able to receive and be in this divine feminine experience. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that means for you?
Well, as we were talking before, I think that a lot of people miss the embodiment piece. You know, there's a lot of ascension, there's a lot of mindset work, there's a lot of raising the vibration, but that is only so good on this physical plane as you can hold it in your body. So our physical bodies really are, the channel through which that energy flows. So we can work all day long on raising our vibration, like in our energy body or mentally or in our mindset, all of these things spiritually. But our physical body has to be able to hold the full range of that transmission.
Yes.
And that's nervous system work. That's, like we talked about, safety and trust and the ability to open. Yeah. I mean, that's the foundation of it. Anyway, there's so many different directions that conversation can go.
Yeah. For me, one of the places I really started to understand, I've understood embodiment for a while, but when it really landed for me at a really deep level was when I started doing my quantum flow work, because when we started to do that, it was like, literally what we're doing in that work is opening our body, shifting the energy in our body to be able to be this clear channel. And one of the things that I really, really understood is that we are humans. We are having a human experience where most people want to bypass that fact and think that if we sit and meditate and hope a bag of money is going to fall on our head, that somehow we're going to be able to bring that to the earth. But the fact is that for most people probably listening to the show, your dreams are out into the ethos somewhere in the spirit, is what Jamy was just saying, in the spiritual realms and the other external realms that are not in your body. And until they actually come into your physical plane, into your body, they aren't real. And so then we have these pipe dreams or these like wishes and these hopes and these desires that are always outside of us, but never inside of us. And the way to actually bring them inside of us is to quite literally bring them into your body. Right. And quite literally, like if we start to look at our body as a dense mass and we hold energy, we hold emotions, we hold all these traumas, all these different experiences from our past, and they all take up space in our body and they can come, I would say, would you say hardened, I guess is a way. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
mean, it's like they anchor and they become the vibration, right? Like they become the way we operate in the world and actually what we see in the world.
Right. And so when we go through the experience of moving our bodies and moving this out of our bodies, then we can open our bodies to be able to receive this. If our bodies are hard and not willing to receive this, if they're not softened to be able to open to receive this, we will deflect it. And so then we constantly are in this battle of like, I want it, I can't have it. I want it, I can't have it. I want it. Right.
And not just with money, like
sex,
relationships, ease, health, like all of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Okay. So what would you say then is a really great place for us to start to be able to look at, if we understand that this is our body, is the way we want to bring it through, and we have to soften our body to be able to, or we have to release the stuff out of our body. What's some things that we can start to look at, or they can even start to do at home to start to really experience the softening? And I would even say this opens up to this trust piece. Like, how do we trust ourselves to be able to do this?
Yeah. So, I mean, movement is the number one thing, right? And not just thinking about movement, and not just watching other people do it, and not just kind of moving without true intention about what you're doing, but letting yourself drop into trusting your body in the way she wants to move or he wants to move, and setting the intention that it is moving whatever is stagnant, whatever is in the way, whatever needs to be released or moved out. And I will tell you that it's not comfortable. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's very pleasurable. Sometimes it's orgasmic. Sometimes it's traumatic and painful and overwhelming. And this is where this idea of trust comes in. It's like, can I continue to lean in? Can I continue to soften and open to this experience without, because it all happens unconsciously. It's not like I'm choosing to deflect things that I want in my life, right? This is kind of the essence of the body, is that her communication is from our unconscious. And so when we think, like I've done this a lot, it's like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need to do my movement this morning. That's my mind, but my body wants to move. My body has things to move. So it's like trusting the process and continuing to choose to lean in, to feel the full range. It's not just the beautiful, easy, pleasant things. It's actually becoming really comfortable with the things that would normally have us wanting to tuck tail and run the other way too.
Yeah, this is something that I literally, as she was talking, I pulled this meme up that I read the other day that really helped me actually understand this at an even deeper level. This was like, when you get these things, you're just like, okay, I get it even more than I already got it. Our nervous system unconsciously controls our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. It does this via the vagus nerve, the main link between brain and body. What it's saying is we think our minds are running the show. However, most of the fibers of the vagus nerve run upwards from body to mind, which means the brain receives more messages from the body than it sends. So the mind creates a story to make meaning from the messages it receives from the body, and the story is often incorrect. So what it's saying is ultimately we go to our heads to fucking solve problems. But what's happening when we start to move our bodies, the information will come up from our bodies into our minds, which is actually what is stored, which is actually the stuff that you want to be working with. The stuff that's in your head is all probably ego and probably unconscious collective and all sorts of other things.
Well, and it's interpreted through your lens. Like you cannot see, it's like a computer that's not connected to the internet. It can only process the information that it has already there. So it can't expand to something new. It can't see beyond what it's looking for to confirm. So of course it's going to tell, and I mean, when you think about our minds, like it's a protection mechanism. It is created to keep us safe. So it's not going to be like, venture into that painful memory. It's going to be like, let's just close that door and continue working.
Yeah, totally. And I know, like, it was interesting because when you were talking about moving our bodies, anyone who listens to me or hangs around me enough knows that I dance regularly. And one of the things that I find in ecstatic dance is always fascinating to me, because when I go into dance, first of all, there's different music each week. You don't know who it's going to, like, what journey you're going to go on by whatever DJ the DJ brings. But also, like, we're in a different place. Each human is in a different place with what's going to come through. And there have been weeks I have been on that dance floor that I have forced my ass to stay on that dance floor because I am in so much pain. Like, my body doesn't want to move. It's rejecting me. It's like, fuck off, Carrie. I want to go sit in that corner. And I'm like, no, you are going to move through every single piece of this discomfort. And it's going to be slow. Everybody could be screaming around you, having a great old time, but you were going to sit and you were going to be in this. And I think and I say this all the time about movement in this way. And the beautiful thing about dance and putting on some music is oftentimes when I love bringing to people to ecstatic dance, because it's a different experience. To anyone who hasn't been, I'm going to say it over and over again, go. But when you're in a room with a bunch of people and loud music and the ability to give your fullest expression, it's a different experience, because most of us will not allow ourselves to actually go into the places where your body wants to move, to be like, where? And like, let that music actually guide you, right? Yeah. It's not you telling your body where to go. It's like, where does my body want to move into this? And you'll find yourself in these, like, I don't know, I do, like weird positions that you're like, what is it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what's there?
This? Right. Yeah. And
right?
I think too, this awareness that it actually probably isn't the body that doesn't want to move. It's the mind. Like the body can actually go so far beyond what the mind will tell us it can. Like when we're running or exercising or whatever, it's a mind game before it's a body game.
Totally. Totally true.
Yeah. I have a quick story to tell you though. If you're talking about ecstatic dance, I've only ever been once. And it was in Byron Bay after level 4 of the spiral training. So we were all like heart open and turned on, and we got in trouble for being too sensual and ecstatic dance. We about got kicked out.
Well, I'm going to say, I can imagine if there's a group of people.
It was spiral crew. Right?
There's a spiral crew all together on dance floor. I can understand.
Heart day. Yeah.
And I could have gotten pretty sensual.
Yeah. It was quite animalistic.
It was great.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I've never had anyone, unless it was unconsensual. I've never seen anybody. And we see some pretty sassy things in our.
Well, maybe your ecstatic dance is a little less conservative than the one we happen to stumble into.
There's lots of contact improv. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's like you have to always touch one part of the body. Yeah. So there's lots of that happens in our ecstatic dance.
Love that. Yeah. Love that.
Which is its own interesting journey of the masculine, feminine. I will tell you that one. Okay. So our body's a channel. Surrender, hold ourselves, trust ourselves.
So that trust ourselves, I think we should touch on that just a little bit.
Because, go. Where are you at with that?
Well, I mean, you and I have done a lot of work, right? And that's still, it's still a thing that we have to do intentionally. We have to intentionally choose. So I think just offering some insight to people that are listening who are like, what the hell is trust yourself? Like,
what does that even mean? Right? What are we even talking about? What's our jargon? Yes, go.
This is because really, I personally came to this trust when I started to look at where I overrode, because I really don't do it very often anymore. I still do, and I have to like catch myself. But the default before was overriding my own yes and no, overriding my own boundaries, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it was, on a regular basis. Like, oh, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I'll just make myself smaller, or I'll do the thing even though I don't really want to. This goes on all fronts, right? This is showing up to participate in something or going somewhere, getting invited. This is also like physically and sexually. How often it's like, oh, I'm not really feeling it, but all right. Like, I don't really want to be awkward or whatever. How often we are not paying attention to our body and the yes and the no of our own system, and just on autopilot trying to keep the peace and keep things comfortable and non-confrontational and safe and all of these things. This ties into being fully expressed, like, let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations, interactions, all of these things that we actually spend so much of our life avoiding, and start to just lean into those places. Because when we honor our own boundaries and our own yes and no matter how uncomfortable it is, we really start to understand what trust is. Like, I have huge trust issues, right? Like, I don't trust him. I don't trust her, whatever. And it was like, because I don't show up for my own trust. Like, I expect them to make me feel safe in my own body, but that's my job.
I'm going to repeat that. She expects them to help her feel safe in her own body. And I was doing the same damn thing. And it sucks. You can't, because then you're putting your safety outside of yourself. And then you will never, ever, ever, ever think that you can have your own back.
Yeah.
And so then you will forever feel codependent.
Yeah.
On somebody else for your own well-being.
Yeah. And their priority is not your well-being. Their priority is supposed to be their well-being, So it's like this endless cycle of outsourcing versus we need to like change the tide. It's like everything's going counterclockwise in this, like, I'm supposed to take care of you, you're supposed to take care of them, versus let's bring it all back to self-holding, self-responsibility, self-communication. And from there, strong and authentic, intimate connections can happen,
Yes.
Completely different paradigm.
I think this is something, Jamy and I have explored a lot over the years. I would say I know, even in our own communication with each other, from the way that we started talking to each other in our friendship to the way that we speak to each other now. And even last year when we were talking about, we did our Canva retreat and Jamy was invited to come with us. And those of you who've been listening to my show long enough know there's an episode on here that'll talk about the Canva retreat that I did with a bunch of our sisters. And Jamy was invited. She was part of the whole thing. And she was like, yeah. And then all of a sudden she pulled away. And then right at the last minute, she was like, yeah, no. And it was just really beautiful. And I want to say this because this isn't just an intimacy. It was a really beautiful experience for all of us. Like, we all wanted her there. She, like, in her head wanted to be there, but her heart and her body were like, no. And so we all had to honor and support the decision that, even though we were all like mentally disappointed, right?
I was mentally disappointed.
You were. Right. That's what I'm saying. We all were. We were all like, we all wanted, right? We all wanted to be together. Yeah. And that's the power of the yes and no, though. Like, there was something else for her or there was some reason she wasn't meant to be there because of whatever happened.
Yeah.
But that's the power of the yes and no. And I'm saying that because, yes, it comes up in intimate relationships, but it also comes up in our friendships. And so often as sisters, we can say like, hey, you need to be here for me. Well, no, you don't actually. We get to choose that the same way that we get to choose how we show up for the men in our lives, the children in our lives, and all these different things. And I think it's a huge part of those sisterhood wounds too. Yeah. That like we do things because we feel obligated.
Yeah.
And then
that builds the foundation of trust in those friendships as well. It's like, I trust you because I know that if it's a no, you'll say no. Like when somebody has strong boundaries, then I believe them when they say yes too. And there is an ability to open and actually receive that, versus like when you can tell that someone isn't in touch with their own yes and no, then when they say yes, it's like, are they here because they feel like they have to be? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it allows room for lots of other stories versus like, I have deep trust in your word because I know that you'll say it like it is, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The other piece of this trust that I've been playing with is this concept of, you've gotten here already. Like, you're already here. And I think sometimes we forget that. Like, somehow I've already gotten my butt to sitting in this exact moment with Jamy on this podcast with you guys. And somehow I've had my back that whatever's happened in my life, I've somehow managed to get through it. So I'm here. So I've got myself. And the other piece, when I dive deeper into that, because this has been a huge thing for me recently, is especially coming out of the relationships that I've been in, all these different places I've been in my life, to actually trust myself, because I didn't. Right? Like, when you've been through traumatic and toxic experiences, you don't trust yourself. Yeah. So how can you build that trust? And one of the things that I started to realize in this last couple of months, and especially in these last few weeks, has been, wait, but I see things. And I think that there's a lot of people who don't even realize how powerful this is. Because I know I was talking to a client last night about it as well. And he was like, holy moly, Carrie, yes, you're right. When you can actually start to see the patterns that are playing and pull yourself up on it, because this is one of the things I think, as we soften, we open our hearts. And as we open our hearts, we're actually opening our hearts to like the fact that it could be broken, like that we might end up hurting.
Yes.
We can also open our hearts to, there's going to be a lot of joy. There's so much unknown as we open our hearts. Yeah. So how do we do this? And the only way that we're going to do it is to do it. Yeah. And then trust that I'm going to see, oh, wait, this is it. I'm going to see that red flag. I'm going to see this piece over here. I'm going to see this thing over here. Yeah. And the more that I can then allow myself to see it, go, I now have a choice. Do I want to continue down this path, or do I want to leave it? And also recognize that everything has a season and a reason. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to open myself. Can I hold myself if my heart gets broken at the end of this in a month or 2 months or 6 years? Can I hold myself? Well, I've made it through the last broken hearts. I'm still here.
Yeah. And that's part of that mind game, right? Like, our mind is always looking for the places that we failed, the places where we didn't see or where it was hard. And we have to intentionally refocus, retrain our brain to confirm what it is we want to experience. I actually just said that last night on that Gate 6 call. It's like, you have made it. Up to this point, yes, it's been challenging. Yes, there have been hard times, but you're here, like, why
celebrate?
Count all the places that we messed up instead of all the places that we did it. We moved through it. And it isn't about trusting yourself to do the right thing. It's trusting that you can hold yourself no matter what happens. Because I think that's the thing the mind does is, what if I don't know? It's like, it isn't about knowing. Actually, there are infinite potential outcomes, right? Like, nobody knows. We can't control that. We may think we can, but we cannot. And so it's actually just trusting that I will know how to hold myself and respond in any given moment.
Yeah.
And that's it, that I can hold myself through whatever happens. And if I can't, I mean, like the only place that's not true is when I die. And then the game's over anyway. So we're not worried about the lessons to learn or whatever. We're on to the next iteration or whatever happens at that point. But that's, maybe ultimately what we're avoiding is, but what if I die?
It's going to happen.
An inevitable part of this journey, right? Like, let's just lean in.
It is. The other thing that I was thinking about this morning is like a metaphor around this, interestingly, around holding ourselves, because I think sometimes that's also like this very jargony experience here is, I think Brené Brown said, if you're not in the ring, you're not fucking getting yourself pummeled down to the ground, then you're not actually playing life. Like you have no right to say anything to anybody else about how they play unless you're in that ring. And I would say, if I look at how I hold myself, it's how do I hold myself? How do I step my ass back up when I've been pummeled onto that ground and I have been left to be like bloody and bruised and battered. And I'm like, fuck, I don't know how I'm going to take the next step, but I do. Yeah. And it's in those moments, that's where you're holding yourself, when it's the hardest thing and you think you could never take that next step, and you do. Yeah. And you do it again and you show up for yourself. So how do you show up for yourself in those moments? Because you do. We've all had them.
Yeah. Yeah. And loving yourself and giving yourself grace and forgiving yourself. Yeah. So many times it's been like, oh, I messed that up. Like, whether it was in relationships or with my kids or with money or whatever, it's like, that was a mistake. And then the mind wants to be like, yeah, you're done. Like, you're a loser, you're a failure, you're a whatever. And, that's a story that we can hold. Or it's like, oh, what is there to learn from this? And it's not over unless I stop trying. I even think about, hearing millionaires losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's like, oh God, I'm a loser. I'm done. It's like, all right, how do I make that again? And how do I make better choices with those investments going forward? Like, there are infinite ways to look at every situation, and we can look at it in a defeatist way, or we can gather information, refine our process, and continue even when it's challenging and painful. Yeah.
And when we can do this,
yes.
This is a win. And actually, I say this because when I started to realize this piece of, I actually have myself a lot more than I thought I did.
Yeah.
It changes everything for you when you're like, wait a minute, then I can open and I can meet this and I can keep going, because even if I'm in the worst place that I could be, I can still get out of this.
Yeah.
And what if it isn't the worst thing? What if it's the best fucking thing?
Right.
Right.
It usually is. After you get through,
right?
It's like, oh, well, there's the gift.
There's the gift, right? And there's the healing, and we get to heal these wounds in our relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do want to add an addendum here, though, that this self-love is a choice that we have to make. But there is nothing wrong with also choosing to receive reflection of love from the people around you. Like, there's this dichotomy of, you got to love yourself first. And, like, you can't receive love from others if you're not yourself. I don't know how many times I've been in the depths of that spiral, and Carrie or my husband or someone is like, you've got this, you're brilliant, and I love you, and you're amazing. That helped me to see that in myself. So I just want to add this.
Yes.
Utilize the love around you to choose your circles wisely. Like, they're the reflection, the mirrors you're choosing to look in. Are you going to look in like dirty, fucked up mirrors? Or are you going to choose these radiant, well-lit, beautiful mirrors to see yourself in?
I love that you brought this here. And I want to add something, because I think this is so fascinating, actually, especially because of the conversation. Like, Jamy and I are bringing a program to the world called Sex and Money. And you're all going to want to be in it. That's all I'm going to say. And one of the conversations we're going to have is around polarity. And I want to actually speak to this because it's a fascinating story having to do with everything that you just said and polarity. So this week, in 2 days, I don't even know what to call him yet, my soon to be ex-husband is moving out. And as of this recording, so by the time this goes live, he will already be out of this house, which is also fucking weird. I'm going to say it right here in live, right? Yeah. And there's a whole ton of other stuff that's going on this week that's really freaking intense in my world. And those who are closest to me know, and many people have been beautifully reaching out, checking in on me, loving on me, all these things. And it was really, really interesting because I never asked anyone for it, because I know that you all know and you're going to love on me. And this is what Jamie's saying. Thank God I actually wrote a post last night. Thank God I have the amazing circle of friends, because in this week, when I want to say that it's probably one of the hardest weeks of my life, I feel so guided and loved that it doesn't, like, I know that even if I don't have my back right now, sometimes in certain moments, someone does, and they're going to remind me and I'm going to be okay. And then someone's going to show up in my face and go, Carrie, you got it. Let's go. The interesting thing, the other day I was chatting with my, he can't just be my ex anymore. The guy I live-in partner, who we were talking about marriage and children together before Hugh. And for those of you who've heard this conversation a little bit, I've brought a little bit to this podcast, but we've had this really deep healing journey. And this last year, we've become very good friends, which is crazy because it was a very tumultuous and volatile and abusive, very toxic relationship. And the other day I said to him, it was yesterday, and I said to him, he's like, hey, what's going on? And I told him I was up for this week. And I was like, so just going to say that if a message from you to check in on me came in on my thing, it would bring a smile to my face. Right. Which is so weird because I never asked for that. I didn't ask for anyone. I didn't need to. I wouldn't even ask him for that normally. Right. But it just like came out of me. Now I want to say this because as the feminine, right, we get to ask for our wishes to be met.
Yeah.
As the masculine in his masculine, he has a fucking strong desire to serve you. So this guy, I'm going to say this is hilarious. This is this polarity. He's like, of course. And he's like, and just so you know, like, even if I don't say anything, Carrie, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. And of course you've got this and all these things. Right. And I laughed at the end of this conversation where he's full in his, of course, like, I'm totally here to serve you. And I'm full in my request of, can you be here for me? And I laughed. I was like, we broke up because Hugh helped me move out of the house that I was living in with him.
Oh, how ironic.
And I was like, holy mother trucker. I'm like, what a freaking circle for that. And I was just like, holy cow, what is the beauty of this work?
Yeah.
Look at the beauty of this work. We cannot understand the miracles that happen in our life when we open, because there was a huge opening in my heart to open to the fact that we would do the healing work to actually heal this incredibly fucked up relationship that was full of so much love.
Yeah.
That ended very, very volatilely. And then here he was without question in full service.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, because this is the polarity when we start to be in our feminine and when the masculine is in his masculine, which is how we are now friends. Like, he's very in his masculine. We see each other very differently right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he could hold that space for me.
Yeah.
Even when there would have been a lot of pain in that for him at some point.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to recognize that polarity doesn't even have to exist between men and women.
No, it doesn't.
You know, I mean, like, even look at you and me and creating this thing. It's like this invitation for you to initiate and me to respond, which is not like the stereotypical or standard receive and penetrate, whatever, feminine, masculine, but it's like when we can create any sort of polarity in the dynamics between two people, it creates magnetism, it creates desire, it creates the tension that makes it feel alive, you know? I mean, both of you and I are in like hetero relationships, so that's the frame and the dynamic that we use, but like this exists on all fronts.
Yes.
And I want to say too, as you're saying that, I would venture to say that there are probably women hearing that story of you asking for what you want and cringing a little bit. That's vulnerable as all, you know, like to,
because what if we get rejected?
Yeah. Or to be perceived as needy, or there's so many stories in a feminine body around actually receiving and opening and asking for and inviting in and all of these things that we are literally cock blocking ourselves in so many ways: money, sex, pleasure, fun, joy, ease, all of it.
Tell me more, like, let's go a little bit more into why we don't ask for what we want. I think it's a really beautiful, say a little bit more about that, like where you're going.
Yeah, I think that this is, at least for me personally, it was a huge part of my journey. We have been conditioned to be strong, independent. I got myself women. And that is great.
Irony of what we're saying, right?
Right.
Hold myself
right.
and lean in. It's a fucking fine line that I'm playing right now. It's not easy.
Well, and it's a duality. We're both.
Right.
We get to be both. But what happens in the human mind is we want to pick one side or the other. So it's like, okay, if I have to be strong, then I can't be soft and receptive. And so we just polarize ourselves essentially. And I think that like the beauty of my journey is this recognition that I innately am both. I get to be both. I get to be all of it. I can be strong and independent and have myself, and at the same time, it's not even like here and then next time I can do this. And I can say, I really want this from you. I can invite it in. I can even magnetize it and tease it in without asking directly for it. You know, like whatever it is I want to do, they're
exclusive.
Not automatically, exclusive or counterintuitive to each other. And I think that we unlock so much for ourselves when we allow ourselves to be any and all of it at the same time. We don't have to choose. But I think also we are over masculine as women in this kind of idea that like, I'm a strong, independent woman and I don't need no man. But actually, I don't want to operate that way. Like, I want to rest. I want to receive. I want to be soft and playful and sensual and all of these things. And in order to be able to hold that end of the pole, I have to be willing to connect with someone who's going to hold the opposite. So what are my choices? What do I actually want? And am I willing to look at my stories and my experiences and my hurt around vulnerability? Personally, for me, it's like, oh, I asked for love and connection from a guy and well, he broke my heart. So I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to take care of myself. Or a strong man is cocky and egotistical and abusive and whatever the story is. And it's like, they're not mutually exclusive. Like my husband has stepped into this beautiful strength and pillar of like just stability and holding in our family. And he is the furthest thing from like toxic and abusive in that energy. But in my mind previously, it was like that penetration is bad. And so I just didn't want it. I don't want masculine strength because it's toxic and it's predatory. Like it's, it's abusive and they're separate. They're not the same. They're not the same thing. Like in a feminine body, we actually need to separate because that's actually the warrior too. That's the protector. That's the provider. That's all of that gives the drive to accomplish and to do things. And so we're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this mentality of what it means to be a strong individual, the vulnerability piece, and then the story of being needy is really big.
Yeah, I think there's a few things I want to add in here. It's such great stuff. One is on needy, and remind me when I forget. The other one is on the masculine and being vulnerable.
Okay.
Needy. One of the things that I have really been sitting with in this, because I've definitely gone into those places. Like I don't want to ask because I don't want to be needy.
Yeah.
And I think to bring into that place for anyone who's listening is just because you ask doesn't mean you're needy. And it can be that you're being needy. Yeah. Right. So the question for you is to check in with yourself. What's the energy of how you're asking? Yeah. Are you asking with the expectation that they will say yes? And if they don't, you're going to be fucking disappointed and pissed off.
Yeah. Or even whiny and like, it's like this, it's like a codependent clinginess.
It's clingy, right? And like, oh, you have to do it. And it really is with obligation and expectation. Yep. It's with that energy. Or are you asking like, hey, this is something I would really desire. If you are available for that, I would like that. And if you're not, then you also hold the energy that's a possibility. The answer is no. Yeah. And that either way, you've put your request out and they have that person on either side, male or female, has the option to say yes or no. And then this comes back to the holding. I know now how to hold myself if the answer is no, and I don't get to have that need met.
Yeah. Right? I get it met in a different way.
Yeah. In a different way.
So the shadow is neediness, and the, like in womb work, the aligned expression or the, like when we look at proper expression of that energy is actually longing. Allowing ourselves to feel the longing of what we actually want in life. And in that longing, that's our magnetism. That's how we call in what we desire. So it's like when we've avoided feeling needy, we have avoided putting out our desires into the universe. So it's like, I don't want it because what if I don't get it? Then I'm going to be disappointed or embarrassed or a failure or whatever the story is, versus like, I long for this. I long for abundance. I long for intimacy. I long for, and this trust that like whatever I'm longing for is also longing for me.
Yes. And then I can attract it by magnetism to me, with me, for me.
Completely detached from what the outcome looks like.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
It's the equation. But the mind is like, what the fuck does that mean?
Right. Totally. It's a feeling. Like people, it is a feeling. It's like, I mean, the way that I can describe it is it's like a pulse in your body. And when you can connect to that pulse in your body and you can soften into it and you can just feel that pulse, it's like, that is your creation piece. That's the force. And so when you can feel that and you can almost feel the other piece that you wanting, that pulse, and you just bring them together. It's like, how can I bring these two pieces to meet in my, as we come back to the beginning, embodiment in my body. Funny that.
Well, and I think this is a big piece of that, the sexuality part of it too, is that spark, that feeling, that energy that you're talking about is our life force energy, right? Like it is our magnetism. It is what connects us to all that is. And it is closely related to what we know as sexual energy. We have distorted sexual energy and we've over sexualized it. But there is sexualization of something, making it sexual. And then just the innateness of sexuality. We are sexual beings. We are humans. It is the perpetuation of our species. So there is like this function of sexuality versus the over sexualization of something. I am a sexual being, right? But that doesn't mean that I invite others to create fantasy of what they want to do with me in sexualizing me. So it's like separating these two concepts and recognizing that our sexual energy is our life force energy. It is what makes us feel connected and alive on this planet. I don't know about you, but like I can go into public places sometimes and it's like zombies. It's like this numb, just robotic sort of thing. And it's like, you can tell that they're so disconnected. And like, I mean, it's like shame and repression of that sexual energy because it's been hypersexualized. So
yes,
like this is a huge part of the stuff that I'm excited to be.
Right. I know. I want to say, by the way, hypersexualized people, in case like that's a word for you, is, I mean, to me, what I'm hearing is like, the bump and grind, like the porn style, like this is sex, which is not true. I mean, like, yes, that can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, you can have friction sex and it can be like 5 seconds and it can be done and you can both come and it's fine.
Yeah.
That's what you want, right?
Yeah.
But
and sometimes that's great, but
sometimes that's great.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about goes deeper, way deeper than that. When we can ignite that, and like, you don't need to have sex. This is the point, is that you don't need to have sex to run sexual energy all day long, every day.
Yep.
Or and by running
sexual, for that matter.
Or you do not need a man for this, or a woman.
Yeah.
You don't need an opposite partner. You do not need a partner. This is like, it can be solo or with partner.
Yep.
Or multiple partners, however you want to do that. Yep. Okay. So this other piece that I was thinking about, that you were talking about, the masculine, feminine polarity.
Yeah.
And as a woman, being willing to allow ourselves to receive.
Yeah.
This is something that I have had my attention brought to recently. And I think is something that I was quite like shocked by it in its comment to me, which was, when do women learn how to hold a man and his vulnerability? Now, you had said many men in their strength, like we look at that as like, the way we've been trained is actually toxic. And the way that we are asking as women right now, as we evolve on this planet, is we are asking for men to show up in their emotions and to show up in their vulnerability. But do we know how to create the safe space for them to do so? Most of us are demasculating men because that's what we've been trained. And because we as women, especially in this era, have been trained to show up and be in our masculine, that we're supposed to now all of a sudden be these breadwinners too,
and we're
do
hurt
all these
and
things.
Angry in a lot of places, right? And it's like we're projecting personal stories onto all men.
Yeah. And so in that, like, how can we actually expect a man to show up in this vulnerable way with his emotions when, again, if you look at embodiment, when our body is closed and not allowing him to go there because he doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And because he doesn't feel safe, he won't open up. And so he won't show you his vulnerable side, which means you will not meet all of him.
Yeah.
And he will not show up in the power that he has, because half of his power, like if we look at these polars, is in that vulnerability.
Yep.
I'm not going to say percentage wise, right? But like, you guys get it.
Yeah. Well, and everybody has a different percentage, right? And I think this awareness, a huge shift in me and Kyle's relationship, was this awareness that his vulnerability does not look like mine. So like I was asking for vulnerability and I thought it would look like me being vulnerable. And so it's like, no, you're doing it wrong. No, you're not being emotional enough. You're not being vulnerable enough. And when I stopped trying to make him be vulnerable like I was, and let his expression, his vulnerability be what it was, and value, appreciate, love, receive it, that shifted everything.
Are you willing to share more like what that looked like for him?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm like a deep thinker and I'm emotive, right? And this is kind of that polarity of the feminine and the masculine. The feminine moves, right? Like we are at our core, it's like the essence of chaos, of mystery, of the unknown. Am I in the peaks or the valleys today? And where we can move anywhere in all of that, right? So there's a lot of movement in feminine emotion and full expression. The masculine tends to be more linear, tends to be the banks, tends to be the container. And his vulnerability was more like sharing his thoughts or his perspective or his experience without, like, it wasn't always tearful, or it wasn't always this deep, sensitive, emotional thing that, like, I'm like, but that's what it is for me. So that's what it should look like when you're doing this. And letting him have his own expression. He's like, I just don't do that. That's not how I operate. I have no desire to go there. I know it's safe to, but that's not the way I'm built. And I let that be okay. Like, oh, actually, it would probably really annoy me to have another me in this relationship. Yeah, I get it now. I don't want you to be like me.
I love that you said this, Jamy, because I think what I'm learning as well is like deeply, deeply, deeply getting on a very different level right now is how we all have very different processing styles.
Yeah.
And all have different ways we want to be communicated with. Like I've been thinking about even like all of the relationships that I have with men over the last few years, like really good friends of mine or really good mentors or people in my life. Yeah. And each one of them had requests for me to communicate with them in a very specific way.
Yeah.
Each one of them. And I had to be like, oh, okay. Yep. I can communicate with you in that way. If that's how, now you'll be able to receive me. You're going to feel safe and you're going to feel available to receive me in this way. Okay. I can do that for you. And yes, that still feels good for me. I didn't have to, if it didn't feel good for me, I could have bowed out of the relationship. But we each have different ways of processing. We each have different ways. And this is between masculine men and women, or women and women, or men and men, human beings. Yeah. And each woman and man and each relationship you have is going to be different. And this is the beauty. If you start to actually pay attention to how people, and ask, how do you want to be received? How would you feel safe in this? How can I be here for you? Yeah. Then you will find that your relationship will completely transform.
Yes, completely transform. I mean, look at us, the way that, it's like full permission to push me, to call me in, to initiate, because some people don't like that. And I don't like that from some people, so it's like this clear communication around what's okay and what we want and what's going to work for us, because that changes in different dynamics and different conversations and different, all of that. This idea too of, I recognize that I actually felt safer to hold, to express, and to emote when Kyle stopped moving with me. So like I would go into my storm in the past and he would go with me, like, okay, let's fight. Right. Like it turned into then I'm going to meet you right there in all that chaos. And what has shifted massively actually is that when I start to go into, and it's not just in conflict, it's like in creation, let's move furniture. Let's like all of that, whatever it is that he holds and is, okay, what do you need now? Like, what does this look like for you? And so it becomes this like stable anchor for me to then explore and move and be fully expressed. And I feel safe to do that, because it's like before, it's like I knew if I went into my movement and he moved with me, it was like, who's holding down the fort,
Right.
So it's been a beautiful, creation of this safe container to be fully expressed. And that's reflected in my relationship, but we can do that for ourselves too. This awareness of creating safe anchors and containers so that we can create chaos, or the mystery, the unknown is where all potential
everything magic
exists.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you take this, and I want to say this like quickly, because I want to move on to one more thing with you, is when you take this concept that you're talking about, where I'm talking about with this masculine, this feminine, this allowing ourselves to receive all of these nuances and really understanding the communication and this energy, because it's a frequency you will feel in your body. When you can start to literally just start to feel in each of these moments, the frequency in your body, you will understand, like, this feels like a frequency of which I can hold. And then sometimes it feels like a shaking, like I can't do this. Yeah. But in those moments, that's when you breathe and you allow yourself to expand to hold it.
I want to stretch to hold it. Yep.
And we stretch to expand to hold it. Yep. And so we can also start to look at, like, how do we then co-create with the universe? Yeah. Right. And so I want to move this from how do we co-create with this universe into, because this is what happens. And this is ultimately why we are talking about sex and money, because we've been talking about relationships. We've been talking about the micro piece of this, but this is what the whole premise of Sex and Money is about. Co-creation, when we actually ignite this life force energy that we are talking about, and we let it shine, when we let it open, when we let it be all of these things that we are talking about, we get to have more pleasure, whether it is with sex with a partner, or whether it's with yourself,
or whether it's feeling the sun on your skin,
right? Like, or whether it's whether it's your dance with yourself, whether it's pleasure just in general, like all of these things, we allow ourselves to have more pleasure. And then we also, coincidingly, also get to have more money.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Because we are open, receptive, and magnetic in that place. So something I wanted to just point out really quickly in this idea of the subtle, or you were talking about like it's a vibration you sense in your body. If there are listeners who are like, I don't understand what that even means. This is like a subtle layer of your energy body. And I mean, as a female, the correlation would be like using a vibrator that desensitizes, right? So it's like we're so used to the peaks, to the really intense highs and the really intense lows, and we have lost touch with the subtle sensations that move continuously in our bodies. So it's like allowing ourselves to come down from those extremes of the, the high intensity stimulation in our bodies, and allow ourselves to be still and quiet enough to resensitize the subtle feelings and, movements and awareness in our bodies. Because if you're continuously in that hyper, stimulated state, you can't feel the subtle awareness that like you and I are talking about, the subtle, no, this doesn't feel right, or no, this is getting a little intense, or yes, this actually is what I want. Like we can't hear or feel those things when all we can feel in our body is the intensity of the highs and the lows.
Yes, more of that right? Conversation happening in Sex and Money. So the other thing you talked about before we got on, and I wanted to have you share here, is because we've talked a lot about this energy, but like, how does this actually, like money and currency, right? Yeah. Money and energy. You said something really beautiful before we got on, and I'd love to, and I know we both agree with this. So go ahead and share what you were talking about as money. Like landing in physical form. You can do it.
Well, I mean, money is essentially the physical representation of energy on this plane, right? Like it's our exchange. It's what gives us the power to do the things we want to do. So money is a physical representation of energy, and our bodies are receptors to it's the physical receptor to that energy. So this whole conversation leads to that. Like, can we soften into this physical form? Can we hold more vibration? Can we hold both sides of that duality? It's the tension of, oh my gosh, I am this extreme and that extreme. It's like when you can feel it wanting to pull you and you got to pick one way, and to be able to hold the tension of the center is the expansion of your capacity to hold energy, which also is your capacity to hold and receive money, wealth, abundance, resources, all of these things. Like we are pushing it away and literally leaving money on the table in so many arenas in our lives because our bodies and our nervous system and our capacity, we just are like not priming and not cultivating the ripeness for that. Right. I mean, like the question of like, why would I want to dance and move and soften and be vulnerable? Because you get more money.
And more pleasure and more joy, more tension in the best ways. And your needs met.
Yes.
All the things. Yes.
But the thing is, I mean, Carrie, it's been so fun to watch you because you're like, oh, I get it now. Like you can't get it until you experience it. And you can't experience it until you're willing to dive into the unknown.
And it's fucking not easy. People.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Like, what if I die in that cave? But actually, the gold is in there, but you really do have to get to the point where the fear of the unknown is less intense than the pain you're just continuously living in.
Totally.
And I think we can make more conscious choice to like call it sooner if we're aware that like, oh, this discomfort is just going to continue to intensify until I can't take it anymore. We can actually just opt to choose like, all right, I'm just gonna go for the jump into the deep end here. And I'm in like 100%, 10 out of 10 every time. It has given me exactly what I needed, but I couldn't see it before I was willing to lean into the mystery.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And like, as I go through this journey and I do, as I'm unfolding more and more into this, like the thing I just keep thinking is it just gets better and better. It only can get better and better. Yeah. And so when I do this, like even in the hard moments, because there've been some fucking hard moments in the last few months, right? But even in those really freaking hard moments, as I've explored new edges of myself, and I have pushed hard on these edges. And Jamy knows I have pushed hard on some of my edges. And in every one of those, I keep that attitude of it only gets better. It only gets better. So even when this hurts like hell, it's still going to be better on the other side.
Yeah.
And it's only because I'm willing to look at these places and try these things and explore these things and be willing to be hurt that it's going to get better on the other side. And the other thing that I really love that you said too was living in these polarities. And this is something that I have talked about many times on here, having, you know, this bipolar tendency stuff. And it was really interesting. I had my neurofeedback session today with my therapist, and I hadn't seen her in 2 months, which is like when you've been seeing somebody as a therapist for like months, for years. We've been seeing each other like every other week for years.
Yeah.
2 times a week, weekly, and then every other week, like for years. And because last time I didn't actually get to see her, I came in today. And one of the things, like, she knew, like, this is a big, right? Like, we've been working towards all of my shit that actually was here that allowed me 2.5 years. We've been working together. So for Hugh and I to like finally be separating at this point, like we've worked for 2.5 years to get to this place. Right.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she's like, Carrie, you've got this, right? You've got this. You've been working your ass off for this. You have got this. But what I got is the fact that 5 days ago when I was sitting in my backyard and everything was fucking spinning around me. And I was like, I don't know which piece to grab because it is so chaotic in the amazing and in the shit, right? I have such huge polars happening in my life right now. And then everything in between. And the fact that I can sit here and go, okay, it's all running around me. Every single piece of this. I can have love. I can have frustration. I can have total grief. I can have all of it. And I can sit here and I can just let it run through me. And it doesn't have to control me. It doesn't have to dictate my life. It doesn't have to take me down rabbit holes of depression for 10 days, 10 months, 10 years on end. I can sit here and I can let it move through me. And then I can be this channel that clears this out so that I can then reconnect into this is this pulse. What do I want? And pulse that. And when you can get to this place, I'm telling you, like Jamy and I will sit here and tell you, it is not the easiest path, but it is one of the most rewarding things the two of us have ever walked.
You know, but it actually is easier than staying in the shit show
fucking
of despair,
shit.
Right? Like
I would choose this any day of the week.
Yeah, it's just more familiar, but it's hard, but it is not any less or any more intense than choosing to be stuck in.
I would choose these issues any day of the week to being stuck in despair and misery. And it just means a choice of moving forward. Yeah. So do you want to share anything? Because I know we have to wrap up. I have a meeting and we have to get going. And I know this podcast has gone for a while, but do you want to share anything from your thoughts on what's happening with sex and money and why people want to join us for it?
I mean, like the main reason I would join personally is because you and I are so alive about what is happening in this container. I tend to join things from my body's yes. Like I have said yes to so many things that I didn't even know what was coming with it. And every time I have grown and expanded. But for the more logical people, I think that we're going to bring a lot of permission and a lot of liberating reframes, like to literally change the way that you understand you operate on this planet. And even beyond that, the way that you operate in relationship to money and pleasure. We've been conditioned with a lot of heavy and inaccurate stories around the way things work. And we actually get to choose differently. And so I feel like that's one of the most powerful things that sex and money is going to bring.
So yes, I would say I agree with Jamy. First of all, this is a transmission. Jamy and I are both like deeply, deeply in this space of really opening to more and more of this connection of allowing our sensuality and our sexuality and our life force energy to allow us to open to more pleasure and more in every way. In every way of our life. And both of us are challenging ourselves to every edge of this. And so with that, it is an amazing transmission. Jamy, like I've said, when we started this, Jamy is one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met when it comes to sensuality, feminine things, womb work, deep healing work around the feminine. And obviously you're all here because I've been talking about money for a long time. So when you put these two things, when you put these two together, it's just like, this is like, and we're soul sisters. There's nothing that the two of us won't share really. This will be a very deep, very intimate container where both of us have this deep desire to see you finally liberate yourself. And whilst it's a 6-week container, for us, it's not about the time. Like we know quantum time, like huge shifts can happen. And the two of us have a very strong intention to see you step into huge shifts happening in your body, in the way that you show up, in the amount of money that you bring in the amount of pleasure that you bring into your life. And so if it's calling to you to say, like, I really am ready, I'm fucking sick of the hamster wheel that I have been living on and the misery that I've been in. And it might even be hard for you to even admit the fact that you've been in the misery. Right?
Yeah.
I know it's been for me, but like when we allow ourselves to open up to the fact that we've been living in suffering and that we actually have a choice on the way out of it. First of all, it doesn't mean that if you're in a place in your marriage, like, you know, you guys are hearing me talked about leaving my marriage. Jamy is totally resolved, like completely shifted her marriage within it.
Yeah. We separated and the like dream relationship now.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. I love watching
you. Can go anyway. Yep.
And that's what we're saying. Like, it doesn't matter. We're not sitting here saying to you that you've got to leave a partner, that you've got to like, just if you're feeling in this place of misery and you want to open up to more pleasure, more joy, more sex, more money, more of all the things that you desire in your life, whatever your dreams are, this is for you. We will have a link in the show notes because I don't even know what our link is yet. It's all coming. It'll be some link.
I love it.
Look at the show notes. Otherwise, anything else you want to say to wrap this up, Miss?
No, just so much gratitude to be bringing this to the world. I mean, it's what I live for. Like, it's the world I vision where people are connected to their life force and their sensual energy, like shamelessly. And so the more big and small containers that we can start to plant these seeds and create shifts and permission, I'm here for it. It's what I live for. Yep.
Yes. We're so excited for whoever's going to join us. Reach out to us. James, tell them what your social media, how to find you.
It's I.am.Jamy.Miranda. So it's I am Jamy Miranda, but dots on Instagram and on Facebook.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you can reach out to Jamy, even if just to say hi, connect with her, go follow her. She's freaking amazing. She talks all sorts of amazing, juicy, sensual energy. Talks a lot about if you're a parent and you want to learn more about that kind of stuff. And obviously relationships, how she's turned hers around. Go check her out. And if you're interested in sex and money, reach out to either of us on either of those places. You can email me or reach out to me on my socials, those. Otherwise, have a wonderful week. Jamy, thank you.
Yes.
For being here with me. I feel like this is not the only conversation you and I will have on this podcast. I definitely feel like there's some more. So until next week, I love you, Jamy, and to everyone who's listening, thank you for being here. We will see you somewhere out in the social medias or here next week.